لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Astray, none can guide. And I bear witness that there is no God worthy of worship but Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is the last messenger of Allah. Inna asdaq al-hadith kitabullah. Indeed, the most truthful form of speech is the book of Allah. Wa khayru hadi Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And the best source of guidance is that brought by Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. وَشَرَّ الْأُمُورِ مُحْدَثَاتُهَا. And the worst of all affairs are the innovations in religion. فَكُلُّ مُحْدَثَةٍ بِدْعَةٍ. For every innovation in religion is a cursed innovation. وَكُلُّ بِدْعَةٍ ضَلَالَةٍ. And every cursed innovation is a source of misguidance. وَكُلُّ ضَلَالَةٍ فِي النَّارِ. And every form of misguidance ultimately leads to the hellfire. The topic of our lecture series is Ibn Taymiyyah's essay on the heart. It is a book, we could say really an essay or a treatise written by Ibn Taymiyyah, and which currently is a part of the Fatawa, the Majmu' al-Fatawa, which has many volumes combining the various works of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. And as a separate risala or treatise, it was published, edited by Shaykh Salim al-Hilali, and that is the version which I will be basing this class or course on. Shaykh Salim basically referenced the Quranic verses, most of the Quranic verses and hadiths, and what I have done basically is to translate the main text, and I'll be giving a commentary on the hadiths and the text itself, as well as finding the sources for those hadiths or Quranic verses which Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned and which Shaykh Salim was not able to find or missed. Now, the topic, of course, on the heart is a topic which is very important for Muslims because of its central position with regards to Iman, faith in general. So the topic on the heart is not a medical topic. We'll not be looking at how the heart works and functions from a medical perspective, but we'll be looking at it from a spiritual perspective, its relationship with Iman. But before looking at what Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah has written, I would just like to introduce Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah with some detail as to his background, who he was, scholar from the 13th century, who probably more than any other individual scholar from that period till now has influenced scholars around the Muslim world to return to the Quran and the Sunnah according to the understanding of the early generation, that of the Sahaba and those who came after them. He single-handedly, from his period onwards, there were earlier scholars, of course, great scholars of the past, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Imam al-Shafi'i, and others who were involved in that same process. But after the period of decline of Islamic law, where in the 13th century we had the sacking of Baghdad by the Mongols, and they're destroying much of Islamic literature, killing many of the scholars, etc. You could say Islamic law fell into a slump. and the various forces which led to the blind following of the schools of Islamic law had become very strong after that period. So much so that the scholars of the early 13th century basically ruled that it was not permissible for a person to switch his madhab. If he was a Shafi'i, he had to live and die a Shafi'i. It was illegal for him to become a Hanafi or to switch from one madhab to the other. And it was even given, the judges in the courts had the right to assign punishment for switching one's madhab. That's the state that the situation had reached. So Ibn Taymiyyah was the loudest voice of that period, calling to the early understanding of Islam, which was propagated by the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, whom, if we were to ask Abu Huraira or Abu Bakr or Omar or Uthman or Ali or any of the leading Sahaba, if we were to ask what was their madhab, of course, we're not going to hear Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, or Hanbali. You know, their way, their understanding is the correct understanding. They followed the madhab of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that is what is obligatory on all Muslims. So Ibn Taymiyyah, as we said, was the leading figure in reviving that understanding of Islam without the, you could say, damaging effects of rigid following of the madhabs. Now, he was born in 1263, and his family migrated from Damascus as a result of the attacks by the descendants of the Mongols attacking that area. They shifted from the area where he was in Iraq. He was born in the area called Edessa, which is currently a part of southern Turkey. The town is now called Urfa. His family moved from there, migrated, made hijrah from there because of the arrival of the Mongols, and settled instead in Damascus, where he grew up. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah's father was a scholar of hadith. He had the title Shaykh al-Hadith, which was commonly given to the main teacher of hadith in the schools of the time. He taught at a school called Dar as-Sukkariya, and Ibn Taymiyyah himself studied in that school. And his father used to have a circle in the main masjid of Damascus where he taught hadith. So Ibn Taymiyyah grew up in this environment, and he studied under the scholars who were available. He memorized the Quran before he reached puberty, and he studied the main sciences of Islamic law, major areas of Islamic sciences, and he was such an outstanding student that people were amazed at his intelligence. You know, from the time he was 19 years old, he was answering questions of scholars in the masjids. You know, issues which would dumbfound the scholars, which they had problems finding, answers for. They were put to Ibn Taymiyyah, and he was answering them. And when he used to be asked to talk on any given topic, if he gave a talk on a topic, for example, he used to get into such depth into the topic that people used to think that that's his area of specialization. You know, that's where his knowledge was limited, but then he had another topic to talk on, and all of a sudden he is in the same kind of depth in that area. So his knowledge was quite vast. He had written in his lifetime more than 300 volumes, and he did not actually limit himself even to the areas of Islamic law, etc. He went into areas of philosophy, looking into the problems which Muslims were facing because of the introduction of Greek philosophical thought into the Muslim mind and the Muslim world. So he dealt with a lot of these kind of issues. He also went into areas of comparative religion. You know, he did a book called Al-Jawab al-Sahih fi man baddala fi din al-Masih, which is the correct answer for those who change the religion of the Messiah. He wrote that, you know, way back in the 13th century. You know, a major work where he tackled their issues, quoted from their books, you know, and debated their ideas, showing the wrongness of it. And one of the things which was noted that when he was going to study as a young man, on his way to his classes, a Jew from Damascus used to meet him on the way and throw questions at him, you know, trying to shake his faith, but it only made him stronger, and he would continue coming back each time and responding to the man, you know, until eventually that individual accepted Islam. Now, he, as a scholar, though he was from what would be called the Hanbali school of law, he did not restrict himself to the rulings of that school. He was attracted to the school because of the fact that the scholars of the school at that time, even though it was one of the smaller schools, because at that time the Hanafi and Shafi'i schools, they were the dominant schools. Maliki was out in the basically in the West. It had been the school in Spain, in North Africa, so it was mostly concentrated out in the West. So the Hanbali school was quite weak. It was in Iraq, but it was weak. He adopted it mainly because of the fact that the Hanbali school scholars were known at that time to take their aqidah, to take their creed from the same sources they took their fiqh. This was the approach of the Hanbali scholars. They were known for that. Maybe the people called them literalists. You know, they would just take their evidences. You want to prove a point of aqidah, you bring Quran, you bring Sunnah, you bring statement of the Sahaba. You know, this is where you based your creed on. Whereas the other schools, by then, the philosophical thought had become so deeply rooted in the various other schools that that's where they used to create their arguments for the deen from. Belief in Allah and all the different things were all based on philosophical arguments. And the different issues of the creed were all argued from a philosophical, a logical perspective. So basically, he was caught in the controversy of the time, the struggle which existed between the scholars of the Shafi'i school and others, and that of the Hanbali school, you know, how to approach the deen. And he supported the Hanbali approach and promoted it, right? Now, of course, the Hanbali, what we're calling the Hanbali approach, was really the approach of the early generations. That was the approach of the Sahaba. When the Sahaba were asked questions about the deen, they didn't start drawing from their reasons and philosophy to try to make explanations for people. No, they said, Allah said, the Messenger said, you know, this is where they came from. This is what they used as the basis for their explanations. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah specialized in hadith. He was known to have memorized huge volumes of hadith. He read all the classical books of hadith. He read them numbers of times. And he became a reference work for people who wanted to know where to find this hadith. He would be able to tell them you can find it in, Sahih Bukhari, or you can find it in, Sunan Ibn Abi Dawood, or whatever. He was well known for his ability to identify the sources, with the chains of narrators and everything. Allah, blessed him with a very strong memory. And the scholars, of course, he had, being a popular scholar, because of his great knowledge, he also became unpopular among those who he criticized. Right? There was a rising dislike of Ibn Taymiyyah because he was a very critical individual. He wouldn't tolerate deviance, so he used to attack it, whether it was coming from the Sufis or from the Ash'aris or whatever group. the expressed deviation with the Shiites. He wrote a book on the Shiites, Minhaj al-Sunnah Nabawiyah, a whole set of volumes in response to one of the leading Shiite scholars of his time had written a book in defense of the Shiite madhab. So he responded to them in an extensive work. So he basically, everybody who had deviated around him, he spoke out against. He wrote against. So naturally, those scholars who were in big positions in the government, who were judges, etc., etc., they were irked by him. They didn't really like him at all. And as a result, they made life very difficult for him. They were always going to the sultans and complaining about him and spreading rumors, distorting his statements, which led to his imprisonment a number of times. The last years of his last 20 odd years of his life, so most of it was spent in jail, in and out of jail. But that is another story. Anyway, Ibn Taymiyyah not only was involved in the literary end of the Islamic thought or Islamic practice, he was also involved in different issues concerning jihad. Where there were issues of jihad, problems existed, he was there advising, encouraging, making fatwas for the troops to be able to fight during Ramadan, breaking their fast. He made a fatwa concerning that. He spoke. He went in delegations to meet the leaders of the invading forces, like the Tatar king Khazan, who had converted to Islam. Well, his parents or himself converted to Islam, and he was on one occasion about to enter and sack Damascus. So the people came to Ibn Taymiyyah, people of Damascus asked him to go and meet this man and try to discourage him from doing it. So when he went before the king, he said to him, "You claim to be a Muslim." Very bold words. "You claim to be a Muslim, and you have with you a Muslim judge, an imam for salah, and a sheikh, and people to call the adhan, or so I'm told. Your father and grandfather were both disbelievers, kuffar, yet they did not do what you have done. They both made promises and fulfilled them, while you pledged and betrayed it. You promised and didn't fulfill it." He had promised not to enter Damascus, but then later on he decided he was going to enter it. So anyway, this had such an impact on the ruler Khazan that he gave his word not to enter Damascus and left. And he asked about Ibn Taymiyyah, who was he? So this was Ibn Taymiyyah. He was in a number of different occasions, going to when Damascus was again attacked later on, he went to the sultans of Egypt and the other neighboring countries, encouraging them to defend it, not to leave Damascus to the hands of the disbelievers. So Ibn Taymiyyah was a scholar who applied his knowledge, was involved in jihad to the degree he was able to contribute. And as we said, he had become very unpopular among the scholars of his time who were blindly following the schools of Islamic law, and who in many cases were affected by Sufism. Sufism had become so widespread that scholars of that time commonly would name themselves. After you name yourself, you identify your name, then they would identify the school of law. They will say Ash-Shafi'i. Then they would identify which philosophical school. They would say, for example, Al-Ash'ari. And then they would add to it also what Sufi school, and Naqshbandi. So it was common for the scholars of that time to have these different labels at the ends of their names, So it was widespread. So his attack on Sufism, systematic attack on the fundamental ideas, not on the people who may be referred to as Sufis. The Sufis call them Sufis, people like Al-Hasan al-Basri, Junaid, Abdul Qadir al-Jilani and others who became saints among the Sufis, but who were they not themselves calling people to worship them or call on them in their worship, So he defended these people and defended, people's right to be aesthetic, to live simple lives, to be away from the dunya, because really the deen encouraged that. He himself lived that kind of a life. He didn't have a lot of trappings around him. He didn't marry, actually. He was so busy and ending up in jail so much time, he didn't have a chance to even marry. So he was opposed, though, to the fundamental issues of Sufism, which lie on one hand, deification of the human soul, claiming that the human soul is a part of Allah within us, the misunderstanding that Allah blew into us a piece of himself, right? It's a misunderstanding, and the claim that there are people who we'll call saints, people who are closer to Allah, who could be prayed to and through. The fact that there are people closer to Allah, we don't deny it. People are in different positions relative to Allah. Allah refers to his awliya, but he has defined who his awliya are. Those who believe in him, fear him, and do righteous deeds. These are the qualities of the awliya of Allah. But for the people, it meant mass of the people, they meant doing miracles, things which appear to people to be miracles, and prescribing different rules and principles of dhikr and this type of things. These were the things which were related to the awliya. So he spoke against their claims and their ideas, the evidences which they tried to use from the Quran and the Sunnah to support themselves, because of course, to convince Muslims, you had to bring some evidences, but they were of course misinterpreted, things which were misunderstood, which they interpreted in such a way as to promote their own ideas. Anyway, he began going back and forth to jail from the year 1306. And he ended up, in the last time he ended up in jail was in the year 1326. And between that time, he was in and out. When people tried to intervene on his part, and express sorrow for what was happening to him, being the scholar he was and everything else, his response to them was to say, "What can my foes do to me? My paradise, my garden are inside me. Whenever I go, wherever I go, they are with me. If they imprison me, it is i'tikaf, religious retreat. If they expel me from my homeland, it's hijrah, again, a blessed act. If they kill me, my death will be martyrdom, inshallah." So Allah's scriptures and his Prophet's sunnah are in my heart. So this was the approach of Ibn Taymiyyah. Anyway, in the year 1326, cases were raised against him where it was claimed that he prohibited people from going to the Prophet ﷺ's masjid. In fact, he had only revived the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he said, "Do not undertake journeys to other than 3 mosques." He revived that. He called people to reflect on this. That this prohibited the setting out on journeys, religious journeys, to mosques other than the Mosque of the Prophet, the Mosque of Mecca, Kaaba, and the Mosque of Jerusalem, Quds. Right? So he was saying these are the only 3 you could make religious journeys to. They were claiming, he was saying you can't make religious journey to the Prophet's mosque, because of course they were mixing up what he said concerning mosques which have graves in it, and claiming then, okay, since he says you shouldn't go to mosques with graves in it, it means he's saying you shouldn't go to the Prophet's mosque, so and so. Anyway, when he was in prison, he was there for 2 years. He still continued to teach from prison. He wrote, but after 2 years in prison, and they saw that they could not shut him down, they couldn't stop him, They decided to take away all his writings, take away his ink, his pens, and left him in the bare cell. At this point, there was nothing he could do. Within 3 months' time, he died. And his death, his funeral, is a classic example of the statement made by Ahmad ibn Hanbal in regards to those who were calling to innovation and who were putting him on trial in his own time. He had said, "Tell the innovators, the difference between you and us will be evident in the number of those who attend our funerals." Tell the innovators, the difference between you and us will be evident in the number of those who attend our funerals. And the numbers of people who attended the funeral of Ibn Taymiyyah were phenomenal. The scholars of the time spoke about it, as something, unseen before or after. Anyway, that was Ibn Taymiyyah. As I said, what is most significant regarding him is his call to the Quran and the Sunnah as it was understood by the early generation, who we refer to as the Salaf. That they followed the path of the Salaf. He revived that path, called to it, promoted it, and his students like Ibn Kathir, Imam al-Zahabi, and others carried on that tradition to the generations afterwards. Anyway, we can now begin to look at the book itself. Actually, when Ibn Taymiyyah wrote it, it's just a continual essay. In the notes that you have, I've divided it into different chapters and sections, based on the main point which he's developing in each. This is just for ease of reading and following the ideas. Anyway, the first chapter I call Purpose of the Heart. Ibn Taymiyyah, Allah yarhamu, said, "Indeed, Allah, may He on high be glorified, created the human heart in order to know things. Indeed, Allah created the human heart to know things. In the same way in which He created the eye to see things, the ear to hear things, may He be glorified. He created every part of the human body for a specific purpose and a particular function. Thus, the hand was created for grasping and holding, the foot for walking, and the tongue for articulating speech, the mouth for tasting, the nose for smelling, the skin for touching, and likewise the remainder of the internal and external limbs and organs." So Ibn Taymiyyah begins straight away his essay talking about the heart. Its purpose, primarily to know things within the overall framework of the body parts, that each body part has been created for a particular function. Each part has been created for a particular function. There's no part of the body which we consider to be vestigial, something left over from previous generations which we don't really need, we can do without it, has no real purpose. No. This concept is a Darwinian, the product of Darwinian thought. The fact that we evolved according to Darwinian thought from the apes, earlier stages we went through, these things, we still carry bits and pieces of it with us. All you have to do is look at the evolution, the development of the human embryo, where it goes through different phases, where it seems to have what they call pharyngeal pouches. It looks like gills, and it seems to have a tail. It even looks like a little fish at the point. All these different things. They say, this is evidence that human beings pass through these different phases. And of course, scholars, who know, point out that the similarity in structure doesn't indicate similarity in purpose, right? Or any relationship, because if we are to take similarity in structure as a relationship, you have the rhinoceros, a mammal found in Africa and India. Do they have rhinoceroses in India? Yeah. Okay. The rhinoceros is known. You also have a beetle in in Malaysia called the rhinoceros beetle, because it has horns on its, what is the head, looks like the head area, it's really the back. It has horns there, it looks like horns. So it looks something like the horns of the rhinoceros, so they call it the rhinoceros beetle. But no scientist in his right mind would claim that there's any relationship between the rhinoceros beetle and the mammal known as the rhinoceros. So this kind of argument is fallacious. It has no basis really in the real world. We have many structures which look similar from animal to animal, and they have different purposes altogether. Anyway, we also know that there are a number of organs in the body or elements in the cells which scholars, scientists of the past said don't seem to have any function. Among them, the mitochondria. I remember when I went to high school and studied the mitochondria, it's way back in the 60s, the scholars were saying these things don't seem to have any function at all. But you had to learn it was a part of the function of the cell, but mainly the nucleus was the main thing they talked about, you know, the RNA, the DNA, and then there was the mitochondria stuck around different parts of the cell. But what its purpose was, nobody seemed to know. Said maybe it's some vestigial thing that has been left over when the cell was evolving. Now they come to realize that mitochondria has a primary role in the formation of RNA and, you know, all kinds of information. Mitochondria has a big importance. Then it seemed to have been nothing, something useless. You know, similarly with the appendix, people talk about the appendix. You know, that it's something just harmful. We don't see any benefit. We can't figure out any benefit from it. They say it's probably left over from the earlier generations when human beings ate a lot of poisonous type foods, and there's a way in which the body used to store the poisons. This was the appendix, you know, because of course if your appendix explodes or breaks inside of you, right, bursts inside of you, many times people die. Of course, if you're near to a hospital, they can treat you. But if you're not, people in third world countries, etc., they die from it. So it became the standard practice from way back in the 60s, you know, that people, with doctors, if a doctor had to go into you for any reason, he had to open up your stomach or near your stomach for any reason, he would just automatically reach down and cut off your appendix. Khalas, throw that along with it, you know, doing you a favor, as they thought, right? But, you know, from the Islamic perspective, we reject this idea. As Allah said, أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ. This is Surah Al-Mu'minun, 23rd chapter, verse 115, where Allah says, do you think you were created without purpose and that you should not have to return to me? Whatever Allah created has a purpose. It's a general principle, you know. I mean, even people sometimes say, well, what about the fly? What is the purpose of a fly? You know, beyond annoying and being nasty. You know, we know the fly is annoying and nasty. We try to kill everyone we can catch, right? But the reality is, the scientists will tell you that if it were not for the flies to break down animal matter, we would be up to our eyes in carcasses that did not decay. The fly finds the carcass, lays its eggs in it, the maggots come and they eat it up, and it's a means of disposing so much animal matter. If we didn't have the fly, we'd be in serious problems. So the fly has a major role. But of course, in the past, people couldn't see what is the role of the fly. You know, and even today, the average person, if you ask him, what's the importance of a fly? You know, he says, well, nothing. It's nothing. What's a fly? We could live better lives without flies. Actually, we couldn't. Right? So even something so insignificant, you know, which Allah uses as the example of the weakness of human beings, that if all of the human beings got together, including the jinn, etc., they wouldn't be able to even make the wing of a fly. Not even the wing, not just the fly, just the wing they couldn't make. To show the weakness of human beings, we'll not be able to create. Anyway, the point is that Ibn Taymiyyah introduces the heart from the perspective of its primary purpose in terms of its function, that it functions as the organ by which we know things. Right? And of course, we're going to look into it in more detail. Know things in what sense? Anyway, he goes on to say, because he compared it to all of the other organs, for us just to put it in that general perspective. It has a function similar to the functions of the others, meaning that each organ has a role, a purpose to be fulfilled. And whether we use that organ as it should be used or we don't is going to determine our relationship with Allah. Because everything we have is a blessing from Allah. All of these limbs that he spoke about, the tongue, the nose, the mouth, the ear, the skin, all of these different senses and sense organs, etc. that we have, these are all blessings from Allah that Allah has given us, that we are responsible for, which we must use in a way which is pleasing to Allah. So Ibn Taymiyyah goes on to say, if a person uses a limb according to the way it was created to be used, and for the purpose for which it was designed, that is the clear truth and justice on the basis of which the heavens and the earth were set up. When the limbs of the body are used for the purpose for which they were designed, because of course when Allah created them, He designed that they be used for particular purposes. We said the hand is designed to be used to grab things, the foot to walk, the ear to hear, the eye to see. That is the main function. But is that function a neutral function? Meaning, no matter what you grab, you're using it for its purpose. No matter what you see, you're using the eye for its purpose. No matter what you hear, no matter where you walk. No. Yes, these organs are themselves neutral. The organs themselves are actually neutral. However, the way you use it will determine whether you're using it according to what it was designed. Because of course, if Allah created us with these limbs, it must be for these limbs to be used in a righteous way. That is what they were designed for, to be used in righteousness, because Allah is righteous, He's good, and He loves righteousness, and He has called the deen is a deen of righteousness. So therefore, the hand was designed to be used to grasp things which are pleasing to Allah, the ear to hear things which are pleasing to Allah, the eye to see what is pleasing to Allah, the feet to walk to what is pleasing to Allah. So when we use the limbs in a way which is pleasing to Allah, then we are now using them for the purpose for which they were designed. Physical function, to grasp, but grasp what? Grasp what is pleasing to Allah. So we have to combine the two when we talk about fulfilling the function of the limb, right? And he refers to that as being the clear truth and justice on which the heavens and earth were set up. Allah created the heavens and earth in truth, haqq, and justice, adl. This is how He created the heavens and the earth. Meaning that all of the things in the heaven and the earth, they function according to His will. Right? Whether it's the clouds, whether it's the stars, whether it's volcanoes, whether it's the seas, whatever, in the heavens and the earth, function according to the will of Allah. And Allah mentions about creation that all that is in the heavens and the earth praise Allah, but you cannot understand their praise. And it's in Surah Al-Isra. Allah talks about that. So if they're all praising Allah, that is their purpose, to praise Allah. So they are fulfilling their purpose. So therefore, in the fulfillment of their purpose, there is truth. And on the basis of that truth, there is justice. Right? And when he talked about the heavens and the earth being set up in truth and justice, actually he's referring to a number of verses found throughout the Quran where Allah says, in fact, وَهُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ بِالْحَقِّ. It is He who created the heavens and the earth in truth. So Ibn Taymiyyah links that truth, the general state that the heavens and the earth were created doing truly what Allah has prescribed. Truth being the foundation of justice, because you cannot have justice without truth. True justice. False justice, yes. You can have false justice without truth. What is the truth? The truth is what Allah has defined as the truth. Meaning, one could say, it is just that if a man can have 4 wives, a woman can also have 4 husbands. That's just. That's fair. Because when we say just here, we're saying that means fair. But on what truth is that based? It's not according to the truth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah, He has made it permissible for men and not for women. So though there may appear to be fairness and as a consequence justice, it's not based on truth. It's based on human reason. What seems reasonable to the human being. And that, in many cases, is not the truth. The truth which Allah has prescribed is one based on human realities, knowledge of the human being, of males and how they are made up because He created them, of females and how they're made up because He created them, and what was needed for them to function effectively in the society together. So Allah prescribed that. He is the one who knew before He created them that most crimes would be committed by men. And most violent crimes which involve taking the lives of other human beings would be done by men. And wars would be men killing men. And so on and so forth. That men would live shorter lives than women. Because He designed them in that way. That there would be a surplus of women in most societies. If nature is allowed to take its course, the nature or the natural way in which Allah has created things. So when He prescribed things according to the realities of the human being, in how He created them. Ibn Taymiyyah then goes on to say, furthermore, that is better and beneficial for the limb and its owner, as well as for the function for which it was used. Right? Naturally, when the limb is used in the way it was prescribed, it is better. It's better. Not only for the limb, but for the owner of the limb. For example, if we get a screwdriver, right? This screwdriver is a big size, so it's made for big screws. But you use it for a small screw, right? So you have to jam it in there, you have to bash it, etc., and then you turn it. It's not good for the screwdriver. And in the end, it's not beneficial for you because you're going to damage that screw. Later on, when you want to take the screw out, you've jammed it in there in such a way you can't take it out. So it's harmful to you in the end, as well as it's even harmful to your screwdriver. So when instruments are used for the purpose for which they're created, then it's better for the instrument itself, as well as the owner of the instrument. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah then goes on to say, such a person who uses his limbs or her limbs according to the purpose for which they were created, such a person is truly righteous. This is the essence of righteousness. Essence of righteousness being to use one's faculties in a way which is pleasing to Allah. That is the essence of righteousness. So he said, such a person is truly righteous, whose state of being is upright. And such people are following guidance from their Lord, and it is they who will be successful. he, in describing them, he paraphrases a verse from Surah Al-Baqarah, in which Allah says there, those are following guidance from their Lord, and they are those who are successful. أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَىٰ هُدًى مِّن رَبِّهِمْ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Right? And this is his style. As he's explaining things, he will slide into a part of a Quranic verse or part of a hadith, and that's how he wrote. And this is how scholars also will speak. When you hear them giving lectures, etc., they may not say, it was narrated by Abu Huraira that the Prophet ﷺ said so and so and so and so, or in Surah this verse that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said so and so. No, they may just paraphrase and insert a verse or a hadith or a statement of the Sahaba or whatever in the course of their talk. Those listening to them, of course, they know, because they have memorized that verse or they heard the hadith, they know exactly where it's coming from. So this is why, of course, for our purposes, whenever these things are done, we will look at the sources of where it came from. Anyway, a person who is following this truth, who is using his or her limbs in the way that they were designed to be used, such a person must be following guidance. Because without guidance, you're not going to arrive there. Yes, we are created with a nature, a natural belief in Allah, etc. But the environment around us draws us into all kinds of things. This is the reality. The environment has this powerful impact on us, which causes us to become everything but what we were created to be. So, for a person to then use his or her limbs as they were prescribed by Allah to be used, they must have guidance. This is why Allah sent prophets with books of guidance to guide humankind. That's why the very first human being who was on the face of the earth was a prophet of Allah. Because if he wasn't a prophet of Allah, he had to deal with his circumstance. He was the authority, he was the one important. Then without that guidance from Allah, then he's likely to make major mistakes and misguide others. So that's why the very first person was not only the first person but a prophet of Allah. Allah sent guidance through the prophets and their books, etc. Then Ibn Taymiyyah goes on to describe the other states of limbs and faculties and senses. You either use it for what it was used, proposed to be used for, what Allah set its purpose as, or you don't. Or in the middle, you don't use it at all. You just leave it as a useless limb, a useless faculty. You don't benefit from it, it's just wasted. So he said, if the limb is not used in the proper way and instead is left unused, that is a loss, a real loss. And the owner is cheated. Its owner is cheated. The limb is not used in the proper way, it's just left unused. That is a loss. Because it means either we're gaining or we're losing. That's the reality. Either we are benefiting or we're being harmed. Now, in not using a limb, we might not see obvious harm. We would say, so what? We didn't use this limb. Where's the harm? Well, the harm is that the opportunity that we had to take benefit from that limb was lost. So who is the loser? We who didn't use the limb in the way it should have been used, we have lost. And he goes on to say, such a person is cheated. Actually, the term he used there is maghboon. And this term maghboon is commonly used in business. In Arabic, it was classically used in business to refer to a person being cheated in their business. Now, that term was used by the Prophet ﷺ in a well-known hadith. The hadith concerning spare time and good health. Prophet ﷺ had said, in a hadith narrated by Ibn Abbas, نعمتان مغبون فيهما كثير من الناس الصحة والفراغ. There are two blessings about which many people are cheated: health and spare time. Health and spare time. Meaning that a person thinks that they have good health and that this will last forever. So they don't take benefit from that health when they had the chance. Similarly, they think they have spare time, time to kill, time to waste. And of course, that time is not always there. The time is gone. Then they look and say, oh, I wish I had used that time to do so and so. They have lost. They have been fooled by Satan and such. They were cheated. Some of the comments that some of the scholars said concerning this hadith. Ibn Battal, he said, the meaning of the hadith is that a person is not free until he has whatever is sufficient for himself, and his physical health is good. Whoever finds that should be careful that he is not deceived by abandoning giving thanks to Allah for the blessings He has bestowed on him. Among the expressions of gratitude to Him is strictly following His commands and avoiding His prohibitions. Whoever fails to do so is deceived. And he indicated by the phrase, many people, that those who are blessed not to be deceived are few. Ibn al-Jawzi, he also said, concerning the same hadith, a person may be healthy, but not free, due to being busy with earning a living. Or he could be without need for earning a living and not be healthy. If the two factors, good health, spare time, come together and laziness from acts of obedience overcomes him, he is deceived. If a person is negligent in his responsibilities due to laziness in times of good health and free time, then he has been deceived. The full picture is that this world is the farm of the next world. In it is business whose profits will appear in the next life. So whoever uses his free time and health in doing acts of obedience is in an enviable position, fortunate and blessed. And whoever uses them in acts of disobedience is deceived, because free time is followed by busy time, and health is followed by sickness, even if it is only old age. At-Tibi, he commented saying, the Prophet ﷺ made a parable of a trader who has capital and seeks to profit along with the safety of his capital. His way to achieve that is to be careful about whom he deals with, to adhere to the truth, and to be a skillful trader in order not to be deceived or cheated. Good health and free time is capital. He should deal with Allah with Iman, fight his desires and the enemy of religion, in order to profit from the best of this world and the next. What is close to it, to this description, is what Allah mentioned in the Quran in Surah As-Saf, verse 10. هل أدلكم على تجارة تنجيكم من عذاب أليم? Shall I show you a trade which will save you from the severe punishment? What is required of him, At-Tibi goes on to say, is that he avoids disobedience. He avoids obedience to his soul's desires and dealings with shaitan, in order not to lose his capital along with his profits. In his statement, Prophet ﷺ said, many people are deceived regarding them. It is similar to the Prophet ﷺ, to Allah's statement in the Quran, Surah Sabah, verse 13, وَقَلِيلٌ مِّنْ عِبَادِيَ الشَّكُورِ. Few of my servants are thankful. Many in the hadith is equivalent to few in the verse. So, the general advice stated by Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi is that Iman, which is the greatest blessing that a human being can receive, should be protected, and that whoever lets the reins loose to his evil commanding soul, which eternally desires displeasure and abandons adherence to the divinely set limits, and constancy in doing acts of obedience, has been deceived. Whoever leaves that is deceived. Similar is the case if he is not busy. If he's not busy in doing righteous deeds, looking after his soul, then he has been deceived. Now, the third category we mentioned, or Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned, concerning the use of the limbs, is where it is used in conflict with what Allah created it for. If it is used in contradiction to what it was created for, that is misguidance and destruction, and its owner is among those who change the blessings of Allah with disbelief. What he has done here is he has quoted a verse indirectly where Allah said, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ بَدَّلُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ كُفْرًا. Have you not seen those who exchange the blessings of Allah for disbelief? Because these limbs were all blessings of Allah. If they're not used to please Allah, in fact they're used in displeasure of Allah, then this is replacing blessings with kufr, because using Allah's blessings in conflict to Allah's commands is a form of kufr. It doesn't mean a person who does this becomes a disbeliever, but it is a form of disbelief, right? Because had we believed in Allah properly as He should be believed in, then there's no way we can use His limbs against His command, use the limbs which He has created for us against His commands. Ibn Taymiyyah, when he said that using the limbs for other than what it was created for, means here that the limbs are used in disobedience of Allah. Using the limbs to do sinful acts is a misuse of the limbs that results from the misunderstanding of its purpose and from misguidance, which will ultimately lead to one's destruction. So, the use of the limbs and faculties can be divided into three categories. Using it for its purpose, that is, for the pleasure of Allah. Not using it, leaving it, that is personal loss and deception by Satan. And thirdly, using it against the command of Allah. And that is, of course, sin, evil. And involved in it also is deception. We have been deceived. Then Ibn Taymiyyah makes a general statement concerning the heart itself. He said, the master of all limbs and their head is the heart, as it has been named qalb, heart. The master of all limbs and their head is the heart. He makes a linguistic mention here, that's why it's called qalb. Now Ibn Hajar in Fath al-Bari, he said that the heart is called qalb because it is the essence of the body and contains the essence of everything. Anything which contains the essence is referred to as qalb in Arabic. It's an Arabic term which means the essence. And we in English, we use it also. We say The heart of the matter. Can you get to the heart of the matter? You know, meaning what? It doesn't matter, it doesn't have a heart really. It means the essence, a core, right? So this is what he alludes to the linguistic meaning. Of course, the word qalb is also explained by scholars to mean, or to take its meaning from its flippant nature, that it flips back and forth. You know, qalb also means something turned upside down, right? So, as the Prophet ﷺ had said, that the heart is between the fingers of the most merciful, Allah. He flips them as He wishes. And He would make dua saying, you know, Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qalbi ala dinik. O flipper of hearts, make my heart firm on your religion. So this is another meaning, but Ibn Taymiyyah focuses on the meaning which implies the essence of things, the core, and that is the role of the heart within the body. Okay, this is as far as we'll go. Today, inshallah, we'll continue to look at the purpose of the heart, still in first chapter, and we'll be looking at the well-known hadith concerning halal and haram, wherein the Prophet ﷺ closed that hadith saying, indeed in the body there is a clump of flesh. If it becomes good, the whole body becomes good. And if it goes bad, the whole body goes bad. Indeed, it is the heart. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك